Hello and welcome to the Ruth MacFit Podcast. As always, I am very happy to be here with you. And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, yes, you might see my eyes darting around the screen because I've got notes on one side. The camera is above my head or above my screen, and I'm probably going to start looking around occasionally in between. But trust me, without having notes, we'd be here for hours while I waffle my way through. And this doesn't need to be a subject that I'm talking to you about for hours. So today's episode actually comes from a client check-in. And I have to say, I absolutely loved this question. It was one of two questions on the same topic that I had in a check-in. So while this phrasing of the question made me laugh, it also raised a great point, and I think a lot of people will relate to it. So here's the question. She said, lastly, a half serious question on your Instagram recipe posts. Firstly, I think they're brilliant. Thank you. So funny and always brighten my mood when I see them. So please don't stop. But some did make me consider if I have rules around certain foods. Anything cooked with protein powder or cottage cheese gives me the ick. It seems like a modern day equivalent of a Slimming World cheesecake made with Weetabix, quark, and Muller Lite from 15 years ago. Is it just me? Would you actually eat these every day? Am I missing out? I mean, what a fantastic way to put it, right? And it really got me thinking. Firstly, that I hadn't tried one of those Cinnamon World cheesecakes, but I definitely remember people talking about them. And I'm sure a few listening will be able to relate to it as well. But I was mainly thinking about, are we overcomplicating things when it comes to food? Just because something is labeled high protein or macro friendly, does that automatically mean it's better for us? And as a side note, can we briefly mention the phrase macro friendly here? Because that is going to be a term that gives me a bit of the ick. I do ask myself why we are calling food macro friendly when it's just food. A balanced meal is a balanced meal, and eating in a way that fuels your body shouldn't require a special label. But there we are. So today, we're going to break it all down for you. How much protein do we actually need? Do you really have to have protein powder and high protein everything? What's the difference between whole food sources and the supplements? And finally, are food rules sneaking into our thinking without us even realizing it? So let's get started. So firstly, protein is essential. I don't think anyone will deny that. It does play a crucial role in muscle protein synthesis, which is the process that builds and repairs muscle tissue. So every time you exercise, especially if you're lifting weights or engaging in any form of resistance training, you're going to be creating tiny little tears in muscle fibers, which are normal. And it's actually how we get stronger. But our bodies do need protein to help repair those tears and build muscles back stronger. This actually happens when you're resting. It's not when you're working the muscles. The recovery, the repair happens when we're not training. But as we get older, muscle loss, also known as sarcopenia, becomes a real concern. And if we don't actively work to maintain that muscle, we naturally lose it over time, which can definitely impact strength, mobility, and overall independence. And I don't know about you, I am looking to stay having adventures, to stay strong and independent for as long as possible. And protein isn't just for bodybuilders, it's going to be crucial for all of us, especially as we age. So I'm definitely going to be including this in my diet. Another reason that protein is important is because of satiety. Protein does take longer to digest than carbs, which means it keeps us feeling fuller for longer, reducing cravings and making it easy to maintain a balanced diet. It's a very useful fat loss tool because of the fact that it does keep us feeling fuller. So if we're having meals higher in protein and you've got a fat loss goal, you'll find that you are reaching for snacks less later in the day. And this is something that clients of mine definitely notice. But with that being said, it is just one part of the picture. Sometimes we do put too much emphasis on one single nutrient and forget about this big picture. If you're rushing around the supermarket and you're grabbing anything that says high protein on the label, you might actually be missing out on other key nutrients like fiber, vitamins, healthy fats, and so on. And that's not going to be helping your overall health and helping you feel energized and better. And one thing I see people thinking is that more protein automatically means better results. But if we only focus on protein while neglecting those other things, then we're definitely not going to be doing ourselves any favors. So let's talk about protein supplements for a moment. And if you're short on time, a protein shake can be a very quick, convenient option, especially after a workout. It's easy to measure, it's easy to track. You can either scan it in or you can just look for the name. And it can be helpful if you do struggle to hit your protein goals, which might be the case for people on a vegan diet, or even those on a vegetarian diet might find that it's easier to supplement with a protein powder. But, and this is a big but, supplements should be exactly that. They are supplemental. They shouldn't replace whole foods. A protein shake might help you meet your target, but it won't provide the same overall nutrition as a meal with lean meats, beans, fish, eggs, or dairy in it. For example, if you were to have Greek yogurt with fruit instead of a protein shake, you'd also be getting calcium for bone health, fiber from the fruit, and a slower, more sustained energy release. Now, I actually love a protein bar. I like the salted caramel grenade bars. Not all of them, and I promise this isn't an ad, this is just my opinion. Though if Grenade do want to start sending me some salted caramel grenade bars, I'm open. But I don't treat them as a nutritious snack. For me, it's like a chocolate bar with benefits. It's a sweet fix with an added boost of protein. So if you're relying on protein shakes or bars all the time, again, you could be missing out on important nutrients that whole foods provide. One thing I see is when people are reaching very high protein in their diet, that if you look, sometimes the fiber levels really dropped off because they're going for complete proteins like dairy and meat. They're not getting quite as much veg in their diet because they're getting whatever is convenient. And then we see this drop in fiber and often drop in other nutrients. So if we want to look at having meals with variety where possible. I also want to talk to you about some sneaky marketing behind some of these high protein products. Brands know that you're very keen to increase your protein intake, so they write high protein on their products. But actually, if you look at them and check the nutrition label, which I highly recommend you doing, you'll realize that you're not getting that much extra protein at all. And I'm going to give you an example with pasta. Tesco's high protein pasta has 8.8 grams of protein per 100 grams. Meanwhile, and I might say these wrong, but Barilla, which is like a navy blue cardboard box, and the Checo pasta, which is blue and yellow one, they are higher quality brands, but you can get them on offer and they're not normally that different in price from the high protein pasta option. They have 14 grams of protein per 100 grams, not labelled like that. You'll just find that the higher quality pastas have a higher protein content. You can normally pick it up for the same price as well. So go and be an informed shopper. Check the packet, check the label, and don't assume that high protein automatically means a better. Another cool thing about protein is the thermic effect. This is the energy your body uses to digest and metabolize it. Protein actually takes more energy to digest than carbs and fat, meaning that you're, in a sense, burning more calories or using more calories just by eating it. And that's why higher protein diets can be helpful for fat loss. Not only does protein keep you fuller for longer, but it requires more energy to break down. And it's quite a significant amount more actually as well. So the UK RDA for protein, I think this is important to cover as well, is 0.75 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And the thing that I want to highlight by saying this to you today is that this is just the bare minimum for you to avoid deficiency. A more realistic target would be 1.4 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. If you're not keen on tracking, there's a very simple approach to making sure that you're getting enough protein in your diet. And that is going to be to include a source of protein at each meal. Think lean meat, fish, eggs, dairy, beans, pulses. And then you could look to include a protein shake if needed a supplementary protein shake. And yes, it is okay to eat cottage cheese and protein powder if you like them, but you don't need to. Now, I want to go back to my client's comment before we finish today. She mentioned that she couldn't imagine cooking with protein powder or cottage cheese and wondered if she was missing out. So first of all, no, you're not missing out if you don't want to eat those things. And that's partly why I did those recipe reels. It's so you could see that you're not missing out. If they taste disgusting, you don't need to eat them. You definitely don't need to force yourself to like something just because it's viral or trendy. But what is also interesting is the second part of her question. Do I have rules around certain foods? And I think that we should all be asking ourselves this to check in now and again. Are we avoiding foods because we genuinely don't like them? Or have we told ourselves they're bad based on old diet rules? I had a message from a client recently feeling guilty about eating a pizza. She was within her calories. She'd just eaten a pizza. Okay, a pizza might be more calorie dense. It might not have all the nutrients in it, but it's certainly not something you should feel guilty about eating. It isn't going to be the thing that undoes any progress you've made. And I think that a classic example of bad food, good food, is with carbs and how people still fear carbs because of old diet culture, even though we know that they're essential for energy. In fact, runners before a long run the day before will often go for pizza because of the carbohydrates in it, pizza or pasta. And on the flip side, how many people now think they must eat high protein versions of everything, even when they don't enjoy them? We don't have to eat cottage cheese pancakes or protein pasta if we don't like them. Equally, we don't need to avoid regular pasta because we think it's worse. If you're finding yourself guilty or questioning whether you should be eating something, it's worth pausing and asking yourself, is this my choice? Or is this an old food rule creeping back in? It might be that you notice you don't feel so good when you're eating certain foods and you're choosing to not have it, and that is fine. It's up to you. But in more extreme cases, food rules can develop into something called orthorexia, which is an unhealthy obsession with eating perfectly clean or perfectly healthy food. It's not a commonly discussed eating disorder like binge eating, anorexia, bulimia, but it is a real issue, and it's especially an issue in the fitness and wellness space. When we start thinking that we must eat in a certain way or that certain foods are off limits, we're moving away from that balance and into rigid food rules that can become stressful, unsustainable, and even harmful. So if you have noticed that you're anxious about certain foods or that your diet has become increasingly restrictive in the name of health, it might be worth reflecting on whether some of those rules are serving you or whether they're just making life harder. Because if we're wanting to feel good long term, then we want to find that balance that works for us. So what's the takeaway from this podcast? Protein is important, but it's not the be all and end all. A balanced diet is the thing we're going for. Whole foods should come first. Protein shakes and bars are convenient, but they shouldn't be the foundation of your diet. They are a supplement. Watch out for misleading marketing. Just because something says high protein doesn't mean it's the best choice. Spread your protein intake throughout the day for better muscle repair and energy, so aiming to get some at each meal. Don't overcomplicate things. You don't need to go for a macro-friendly meal. You just need a balanced one. So aiming for protein, veg, include some carbs, whatever, just a balanced meal. And most importantly, be aware of food rules. If you don't like something, don't eat it. If you do like something, enjoy it. Don't feel guilty. No unnecessary rules. If you're somebody that says, I don't like vegetables, so I'm never going to eat vegetables, well, then I am going to encourage you to try and find some vegetables that you do like. And I think that's important to reflect on here. I hope this episode has given you a clearer understanding of how protein fits into a balanced diet. If you enjoyed it, let me know. And if you've fallen into the high protein marketing trick or notice that food rules are sneaking into your thinking, then drop me a message because I'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast because it helps other people find it. And if you want any more information, you can find me on Instagram at Ruth MacFit or on my website, www.ruthmacfit.com. Until next time, goodbye.